Harvard Divinity School.
100 Years Rudolf Steiner, December 15th and 16th, 2025.
Good morning. I want to thank the organization group for the possibility to be here, not only presenting, but especially witnessing this unbelievable moment of all these presentations. So thank you very, very much. My name is Constanza Kaliks. I was asked to present myself, but then I thought I will not lose time from my 20 minutes. In doing so, I was a former math teacher in upper school. I came from Brazil, from South America. And I was a teacher in a high school in São Paulo for many years, as I said, 20 years. And also I was in the teacher trainings for 20 years. And since 2012, I work at the Goetheanum in Switzerland and in the leadership now of the section of the Department for Education and also in the Department for Anthroposophy. The topic of this presentation has a long title, The Pedagogical Impulse of Rudolf Steiner as a Contribution to the Perspectives Demanded by the Educational Challenges Posed by the Epistemologies of the so-called Global South. And one could ask themselves, what does mean? And I will try to underline some aspects of these epistemologies of the Global South developed since the 50s of the last century. We can say the 50s, 60s, 70s. It started as a movement in South America and in Central America with the idea to try to understand and to have an epistemology rooted in the reality of those who are living in very unprivileged conditions. Is it possible to understand the individual, the societal challenges and realities with a thinking that is originated from somewhere else, as from the places in which these challenges are reality? This was a big, big question, and it's still a big question. Can we really understand? And with understanding, I mean also research, I mean the reality of our comprehension with frames that are originated in other realities. And this is a question also for academia. Yeah? And in the 20th century, there is an awareness starting for this kind of perspectives. And in this realm, questions were posed in this now so-called epistemologies of a Global South. When they started to research with these perspectives, this name was not still there. And we have different streams as the ethic of liberation, theology of liberation, and I will not summarize all of that here now. Different streams that nowadays we can call them all together, maybe these epistemologies of the Global South. And my thesis here, my little thesis, is that Steiner pedagogical impulse embraces some of these perspectives that are then underlined out of this effort of thinking the reality of those who live in these places and these conditions out of their reality. Good. And I would like to bring in this context especially three aspects of this very often stressed questions of the epistemologies of the Global South. The first one is the understanding of the self, or the understanding of the I, or the understanding of the individuality as a reality of relation, as a reality of mutuality. The second one is the call for the respect for the experienced knowledge of the other. And the third is the question in which extension our understanding and our research should at the same time be a transformative reality and not only a mirroring one. In this sense, we can say that Steiner, who of course started with his pedagogical impulse in the early 20th century, so many decades before this started to be developed in Central and in South America and then extended to the global South. Even so, he brings in his educational proposals topics for these three questions that are, and now I choose the word, in a certain convergence with these proposals. And I say as a mathematician, the word convergence. Convergence is a very specific thing. It's not going in parallel. It's not identical. It's converging. And I think that in this dialogue in between Steiner and the epistemologies of the global South, it is right to speak about convergences. It wouldn't be right to speak about identities and also not about parallelism. So, good. May I have some help here? Okay, now it works. Thank you. So, points of convergence. The first one is the question of reciprocity, of mutuality as the constitutive element of the experience of what Rudolf Steiner will call the I, the self, the individual. So, and the consequence, the pedagogical consequence of this topic is that the relation will be the foundation for all learning. And in this context, I would like to underline the contribution of one of these authors of the Epistemologies of the Global South, Henri Dussel. He lived from 1934 to 2023. He came from Argentina. He was a professor in the university in Ciudad de Mexico for many decades, very internationally active also in Germany, in France, and in other places. And he wrote many books, and I will quote him now from his Ethics of Liberation in Times of Globalization and Social Exclusion. And he will write, quote, "Human being is a relational concept. One is only human in relation to the other," end of quote. So he asks himself, how can we speak about the humanity of the human being? It's not possible to understand it as something that is, so to say, grounded in itself as it was thought also in many of the authors which Steiner refers to from the 19th century, who understood the I or the self as an element self-constituted, and then eventually in relation with the world and with the otherness of the others. And Henri Dussel will say, so as other of these authors, this is not the reality of the I or of the self. The reality of the self, of the human being, is a reality of mutuality, is first a reality of mutuality. And in this relation to the otherness, the I can experience him or herself as an I. And here we have this point of convergence with Steiner. Steiner speaks about the I or the self as a reality, as an event of encounter. And I quote him now, "The self derives its essence and its meaning from that with which it is connected with." So the self takes its existence, takes its meaning from that with which is connected, with which it is connected with. And this will have, for Rudolf Steiner, many consequences also for education. And in his proposals, in his contributions for education, the relation is a constitutive element from the beginning on. And in a certain sense, we can say that his anthropology, his description of the human being as a being in constant becoming, is a description in which he specifies the ways or the forms in which the desire to connect, the desire to belong, the desire to relate appears. So his anthropology, we can maybe say, simplifying and underlining these points of convergence, his anthropology is a description of this mutuality in the growing up child, in the youngsters, in the human being. So this would be then the first point of convergence. The second one is the respect for the lived experience. And here I'm very happy to speak about Paulo Freire, this very important Brazilian educator, also from the 20th century. And Paulo Freire wrote some books, one of them very well known, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Maybe some of you may know this book. And Paulo Freire's first experience was with adults, and he was working with the alphabetization of adults who couldn't, because of their situation, social vulnerable situation, couldn't learn to read and write as children. And he discovers the necessity to relate to the wisdom, to the experience knowledge of this otherness, to then, out of this reality, together develop the possibility to learn, to write, to read, and to learn in general. And for him, Paulo Freire says all the time, I need to think the otherness from the reality of the other. And I need, if I want to go into common processes of learning, I need to base all what I do in education with adults, but also with children, in the respect, in the deep respect for this, for me, maybe unknown wisdom and experience of the otherness of the other. And for him, education is in this sense a practice of freedom, because the other is not empty. The other always brings experience with himself or herself, and I need to try to relate to that. And also this experience is always rooted, deeply rooted in concrete subjects, and education will so never function, he says, if I take education as technical skills and an acquisition of programs. I need to be in dialogue with this reality of the other. And for Rudolf Steiner, the respect for the lived experience, the respect for this reality of the otherness in their relation in education is essential. He will develop his whole contribution for education in this child-centered approach. It's stage-specific, but it's first of all related to the reality of the child's environment. Where is this child coming from? What are the surroundings? Who is with this child? And so on. This all plays a huge role, the cultural belongings in plural. And never education as the fulfillment of an already done program that I just will then apply. So this would be this second point of convergence. And now the third one is what here I wrote as participatory action research. This kind of research, very well known, especially in humanities, up from the second part of the 20th century, and validated in academia, as we heard also yesterday. It started to be something that was very important in this so-called Epistemologies of the Global South, connected to many important names and authors as Orlando Fausto Borda and others. And it is this idea that knowledge and research if it is, or especially when it is in social realms or connected to people, it needs to be always at the same time, not a projection from somewhere else, but it needs to be in connection with the so-called subject of this research. And that means that it will be at the same time acquisition of knowledge and transformation and reality of transformation. 5 minutes, right? Good. Okay, good. I will try to do my best. And so this is also absolutely in convergence on Steiner's perspectives of knowledge and of learning. And one aspect of that is that for Rudolf Steiner, the work, the ongoing research, but in the sense of a participation of a transformative research, was in the core, or Steiner says, in the heart of the school, when all teachers come together on weekly basis, and they really try together to read the child, to read the world. And again, I would like to quote Paulo Freire. I will read it very fast. When he was the Minister of Education of the state of São Paulo, he was interviewed. And then he said what was the most important thing for him for teachers' ongoing education. In Brazil, the teachers, when you are a teacher, you are obliged to do ongoing further education. It's not something you study and it's then, but you need every year again and again, and you need then to show that you have done that. And he started with that when he was the Minister of Education. And then he speaks about this program in an interview. This program, I quote him, takes many different forms. Priority will be given to training that takes place within the school itself, with small groups of educators or with larger groups formed by grouping together of nearby schools, the neighborhood, the surrounding of education. This work consists of monitoring the action, reflection, action of educators working in schools. It involves explaining and analyzing pedagogical practice, surveying topics for analysis of practice that requires theoretical grounding, and reanalyzing pedagogical practice, considering reflection on practice and theoretical reflection. End of quote. All that in constant exchange in between those who are responsible for the educational realm. And this enables intercultural translation and these knowledge ecologies, as in this Global South Epistemologies is underlined, in the sense that you are always adapting experienced methods in wherever realities you are, in this case in South American schools. And it serves, because it is an ongoing process of knowing, knowledge, and social transformation, it will bring this, this possibility to serve diverse, also vulnerable populations, and to promote this intercultural translation from inside out, so to say. Yeah, and conclusions and implications is that, in my view, Steiner's pedagogical impulse brings important aspects for the Southern epistemological tenets as a living and transformative educational framework. It is of great pedagogical relevance because it offers a concrete pathway for education in culturally plural contexts, as the example of South American and Central American context, but not only there, as you will know in this country, absolutely also a very plural cultural context. Yeah, further directions, the possibility to foster systematic participatory action research studies across these settings in the Global South, the ongoing co-development of curriculum modules that explicitly foreground local knowledge ecologies, and this is an ongoing process in many schools that are inspired by Steiner's pedagogical impulse, and policies of dialogue on integrating Rudolf Steiner's pedagogical impulse, we can say also Waldorf-inspired practices within public education possibilities and programs. Yeah, so far. And well, thank you very much for your attention.
Sponsored by the Program for the Evolution of Spirituality.
Copyright 2023, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.